Thank you, Tamika, and good evening to our viewers wherever you're joining us from at this point in time. We start off this evening's regional news by telling you that Police Inspector Roger Alexander has promised residents of Morphant that justice will be served and that they will be given a full account of what transpired with the shooting to death of 3 men in 2nd Caledonia on Saturday. The police shootings claimed the lives of Israel Clinton, 27, Noel Diamond, 44, and Joel Jacobs, 38. CCTV footage raised questions about what really happened after Jacobs was seen coming out of the vehicle with his hands up in the air, turning around twice in front of several heavily armed officers, conversing with them at gunpoint, and then returning to the vehicle just before the officers opened fire. It was the day he was celebrating his 38th birthday. Alexander said he knew the men personally. He explained that Police Commissioner Gary Griffith and the executive have launched an investigation into the matter, adding that those who have information and are witnesses should come forward and give information to the police service. While the residents were protesting, officers from the Police Service Complaints Authority and Professional Standards Bureau were also conducting their inquiries. After Alexander addressed the residents, protests continued as some residents blocked roads with burning debris, and some went even further to block parts of the eastern main road in the vicinity of Morphant Junction. According to Commissioner Griffith, to date the officers were not suspended from their duties. The Commissioner of Police said the vehicles at the scene had dash cams, but noted that the vehicles were facing in the opposite direction to the incident. The number of people killed by police in the last year has risen by 86%, a figure that is of concern to the Police Complaints Authority. For this year, 43 people have already been killed by the police, the majority being Afro-Trinidadian. And as we continue with the regional news this evening, let us now turn our attention to neighboring Venezuela, where Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on Monday ordered the European Union envoy to leave the country, hours after the EU announced sanctions against several officials loyal to the socialist leader. The EU subjected 11 officials to financial sanctions, citing their actions against the democratic functioning of Venezuela's National Assembly. The European bloc earlier this month said a decision by the South American nation Supreme Court in May to ratify an ally of Maduro as president of the National Assembly was illegitimate. Opposition leader Juan Guaido was the rightful congressional president following his election by the majority of members in January, not the court-approved Luis Parra, the EU said. Parra was among those named in Monday's sanctions, along with Franklin Duarte and Jose Gregorio Noriega, who were named as vice presidents of the Assembly in the May court ruling. Maduro gave the EU envoy Isabel Brejant Perdosa 72 hours to leave the country after the sanctions were announced. A plane can be loaned to her to leave, he said during an appearance on Venezuelan state TV. Also on the EU sanctions list were Juan Jose Mendoza, president of the Supreme Court's Constitutional Chamber, and General Jose Ornelas, head of the National Defense Council. The EU said the 11 individuals are particularly responsible for acting against the National Assembly's democratic functioning, including stripping parliamentary immunity from several of its members. The EU said the new list took the number of Venezuelan officials under sanctions to 36. And finally, on this evening's regional newscast, an update from the World Health Organization. The worst could still be to come in the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization, WHO, has warned, 6 months on from when the outbreak began. WHO head Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the virus would infect many more people if governments did not start to implement the right policies. His message remained test, trace, isolate, and quarantine. More than 10 million cases have been recorded worldwide since the coronavirus emerged in China last year. The number of patients who died is now above 500,000. Half the world's cases have been in the US and Europe, but COVID-19 is rapidly growing in the Americas. The virus is also affecting South Asia and Africa, where it is not expected to peak until the end of July. Dr. Tedros told the virtual briefing on Monday, "We all want this to be over. We all want to get on with our lives. But the hard reality is this is not even close to being over. With 10 million cases now and 500,000 deaths, unless we address the problems we've already identified at the World Health Organization, the lack of national unity and lack of global solidarity, and the divided world which is actually helping the virus to spread, the worst is yet to come, he said. I'm sorry to say that, but with this kind of environment and conditions, we feared the worst. He also urged more governments to follow the examples of Germany, South Korea, and Japan, which kept their outbreak in check through policies that included rigorous testing and tracing. And that has brought us to the end of this evening's newscast. I thank you for joining us, and on behalf of the regional news team, I'm Wendell BADRIE.